Gentle Fern was cruising through the sky on her broom, making her way back to her home tribe. It was the cult's first missions trip. She was worried of failing Joan. She wasn't sure yet how she was even going to explain the new life she found to her family and friends. She recognized the river and knew she was getting close. She landed by the water to ready herself, get some lunch, and refill her water skin. The river had a steady current, and the sloshing of the water to shore and rocks had drowned out the unexpected visitor behind her. She turned to see a massive bear. It looked of pure muscle, despite its signs of starvation. Right between her and the bear was the bag of spell quartz, her broom, and supplies. She calculated the distance and the timing it would take. With a deep, preparatory breath, she sprinted to gather, at the very least, the quartz and the broom to make an escape. The bear's massive mass started its charge to her at the same time. Seeing the speed of it, she realized quickly there was no time, and turned with a slide and jumped into the river. When she popped up for air, the current was already dragging her along with it. She looked to see the bear tapping its paw to the river with hesitation before it too jumped in. "Oh no," she exclaimed with another inhale, and started swimming with the current to gain more speed away from the pursuing predator. She made her way around the first bend and turned. The splashing of the frantic hunter was still on her path. Further around the bend, tall rock formations could be seen. She tried saving some energy and let the current pull her. With a few helpful kicks, she made it to the shoreline. She crawled through the muck and mud of it all until reaching soil. Gentle Fern darted for the rock formations and started climbing, her hands and feet slippery, making it difficult. Her panic started to overcome her actions. When she looked to see the bear had climbed its way free of the river as well. The steep rocks were making climbing hard on Gentle Fern, but even harder on the bear, who was struggling to get up even the first few sets of boulders. Gentle Fern threw a leg over the highest rock now, and wormed her way to the top, catching her breath before looking down. The beast was persistent, and still rock to rock, getting higher and closer. Gentle Fern was frozen with fear, but the bear, with a roar and a slipped paw, fell back to the forest floor. Gentle Fern watched it run off into the woods and around the river bend. She laid for some time recovering from the event before getting back up. The temptation to continue the journey on foot was present in her mind, but she needed the quartz. That proof was key to convincing her old tribe that Joan was truly a woman touched by Chana. She crossed the river, staying to the opposite side of where her camp and the bear ran off to. As she approached where her break spot was set up, she crept up and snuck closer, still opposite side of the river, and there it was, sniffing and poking around. It returned to her camp. She crept away, already accepting defeat. Deeper into the woods, already reciting a sales pitch in her head, a new way to convince her old tribe members to join. In the first tree clearing, as she looked to the sky, she saw a cloud form in the shape of a witch hat, a personal miracle just for her to witness. She looked at the cloud and reflected inward to herself. It reminded her of how she helped fight off the Whitby attackers, how she was now a quartz caster. It reminded her of her duty. She touched her head where her hat had rested for all those weeks. It remained abandoned and shamed at the river's coastline, a prisoner to the bear and her own fears. She was not just Gentle Fern, Longleaf's hunter's wife anymore. She was a disciple of Joan. She turned back and walked toward where the river was. She gathered sticks and long grass on her way back and arrived at a tree she felt comfortable climbing. She sharpened the sticks on both ends and drove them into the ground around the tree. She weaved the grass and roots together, making twine and ropes. The entire afternoon she worked without stopping, even though her palms were blistering. She knotted her rope to the largest rock she could find and heaved them over the branches of the tree, tying the other end of the rope higher, causing the rocks to suspend and dangle in the air. The day was growing late, and she needed the light of the sun. She was out of time to prepare further. She walked to the river to find the patient bear. To her disappointment, had remained. A deep breath, and with shaking hands, she made a pained yelp noise. It got the bear's attention, and it started to cross the river. Gentle Fern at full sprint ran to the designated tree and began to climb. As she reached her high branch, she could see the bear was already almost to her. The spike traps she laid scattered all around the tree trunk and the path leading to it. She could hear them snapping one by one under the weight of the beast with no effect. Her doubt was causing her heart to race and adrenaline pump with fear. Just as the bear stood on its hind legs ready to climb in pursuit, it growled a horrific growl. Gentlefern could see a spike had pierced through its paw. It fell backwards and rolled over, showing a few more were sticking out of its back now. She sucked a deep breath and waited, but the bear was not yet deterred. It climbed the trunk of the tree. Gentlefern reached under her and started to lift and swing the rocks dangling from the branch, letting them collide into it. A stored spear was grabbed next, and she stabbed down, the bear taking each new wound without care. She stabbed and stabbed, screaming as the bear pushed through its pain, getting closer and closer. She could feel the tree starting to bow under her, all the weight and strain. The bear's speed increased as the vertical climb slowly turned into a slant. She tucked her legs up to avoid the swats and swipes of its clawed paws. It was moments from getting her until a loud cracking snap split the tree down into the ground. The fall knocked the wind out of her, and her head smacked hard to the ground. She was dizzy, and the bear recovered more quickly than she did and was already almost on top of her, when suddenly she saw a dozen arrows fly and stick out of its side. A few moments later, another volley, and the bear slumped over dead to the side. She turned to look, and there were Saracens. The rival tribe had saved her. Her blurred vision went black, and she passed out. She was slipping in and out of consciousness. The moments she awake were met with severe throbbing in her head and abrasions to her wrists and feet where the Saracens tied her. She was being dragged and carried all the way back to their turf. Her eyes opened and she recognized the field they were passing, the Chikoi tribe site, but she could see it was not there. Half-burned tents and decomposing bodies left around, and the scars of battle all over. She sniffled and cried at the sight. The Chikoi lost the war. Upon arriving, the Saracen tribe showed evidence of war as well. Defenses around the perimeter and grave sites in the near fields. That's when she saw it, a sight that made her stomach churn. A large cage constructed and filled with Chikoi women. Gentlefern was dragged kicking and fighting and tossed in with the others. Neighbors, friends, and acquaintances rushed over to see her. "Gentlefern? What are you doing here? You're alive!" She was swarmed with attention, hugs, and questions. The question she answered first, though, was the woman who asked her where she's been. "I've been with Longleaf and Acorn, deep into the unknown forest. We met someone, a woman touched by the Chana, and has used her as a vessel." To the others, Gentlefern sounded insane. They cared for her wounds and ignored what sounded like crazed rambles. With a sigh, she stopped. They didn't believe her. "What is going on here? Why are they doing this?" The women looked amongst themselves, waiting for someone to have the courage to speak up. It was Deerhoof that finally spoke to break the silence. Deerhoof and Gentlefern often played games together as children. Most times they were getting into mischief and trouble around the tribe, but they had lost touch after they each got married. "We lost. They attacked us and killed all the men, captured us all, about a week ago now. They've been arranging marriages for us one by one." Gentlefern peered through the cage's gaps and saw Saracen warriors on constant watch and patrol. Their entire tribe was run like a military base now. Deerhoof continued. "They're letting their best warriors choose their Chikoi prize wives. Spring Breeze and Snow Moss have already been chosen." Gentlefern looked back at the group of women. Both Snow Moss and Spring Breeze looked away, breaking eye contact, confirming it as truth. Gentlefern turned to the branch bars and shook and tested them. While the cage was not sturdy enough to stop them from escaping, the guards and warriors were. Some guards looked to Gentlefern testing the cage and came over quick and poked spears without intention to harm through the gaps. The threatening guards had their attention quickly taken by the rest of the warriors now arriving and hauling the remains of the bear to camp. All the Saracens rushed over in celebration to help bring the bear to the large communal fire. Gentlefern's attentions were focused on one warrior in particular. Her hat and a pouch had been retrieved by them. She turned to her fellow prisoners. "I will take you to the Chana. With the gifts of her powers we can escape." The group of women murmured and whispered amongst themselves. "Deerhoof, when the timing is right, take a stone from that pouch." She pointed to the warrior and the pouch hanging from his hip. Before Deerhoof could even accept or deny the mission, Gentlefern was already waving him over. They recognized each other, and Gentlefern sweetly spoke. "Stoneclaw, do you remember me?" He stood at the cage and simply and directly, "I do." She smiled. "Have you chosen a Chikoi wife yet? I've been lonely since Longleaf died. I'm so lost without a husband now." Stoneclaw eyed her with suspicion and began to turn away when Deerhoof came forward. "No, choose me. I come from a long line of man-bearing women." Stoneclaw's attention went to Deerhoof, and Gentlefern snuck a hand through the cage. But the sack was out of reach. It was on Deerhoof's side. Now, Gentlefern interrupted Deerhoof to draw his attention back, hoping to give Deerhoof an opportunity to try. She tugged at her shirt to expose greater cleavage. But I can do so much more than simply provide boys. Stoneclaw was getting hypnotized at the bickering women fighting for him, that Deerhoof was able to dart her hand into the pouch and pull out a quartz. Stoneclaw jumped back. Hey! Deerhoof tossed the quartz to Gentlefern, who caught it and held it out and yelled heroically, Nen fly! But nothing happened. Nen fly! Still nothing. Deerhoof had grabbed the one fire quartz in the whole group. Gentlefern looked to the campfire surrounding the warriors and Saracens. She screamed out, Messna fire! The large community fire grew and reached out with what looked like tentacles of fire, dozens of them growing out from the blaze and wrapping to each Saracen. Their screams of agony made the other women sick, but Gentlefern didn't let up. Stoneclaw turned just as a fire tentacle wrapped around him and threw him against the cage, breaking and burning it open. Gentlefern clenched the quartz so hard her palms bled, and as the Saracens scattered, and the ones that came from their tents, they were all met with their own personal snaking fire. The Chikoi women watched in horror and shock. It looked as if a kraken made of fire was running a rampage through the tribe. Chief Waterstone stood watching the carnage until Gentlefern sent 3 blazing appendages just for him, lifting him in the air and then throwing him high into the night sky. The Saracen women ran, and Gentlefern spared them. But within minutes, she had completely eradicated the Saracen tribe. Gentlefern turned, huffing heavily, and her hand dripping with blood. Chana is real. Come with me, all of you, and open your hearts to her teachings.